It is now in the morning of May 5th, 2026, and I'm recording this story in Fredericton, New Brunswick, my hometown in eastern Canada. There's probably a good reason why the age of maturity used to be 21. By the age of 21, a person was expected to have some kind of ability to look back on their life experiences and learn from them and be a stable person. So I'm going to look back 21 years to 2005, when Bobby Fischer was released from jail in Japan after spending 9.5 months on a trumped up false charge based on his opposition to the influence of Israel in U.S. Political and business affairs. This is not a story that I chose to get involved with. I was born on February 15th, 1961, here in Fredericton, Canada. My father was a survivor of World War II. He had served as an officer in the Army of the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, which was led by his relative, the King Peter II, the last king of Yugoslavia. My grandfather was the commander of the Royal Guard. My grandmother in Serbia was one of the richest women in the country. Her family in the 1800s had moved to the northern agricultural region of Serbia called Vojvodina, where her family became equipment suppliers for farmers. That area is known as the richest farmland in Europe. And they became millionaires by being the first people in the region, which was then part of Austro-Hungary, to introduce mechanization. And that meant steam-powered tractors, and then after that, petroleum-powered tractors, harvesting equipment, treatment equipment for grain and products from the farms. And so even before World War I, they were millionaires, which was relatively uncommon, not just in Europe, but anywhere in the world at that time. They had the first Ford Model A in the Balkans, even before the King of Serbia had one. And my grandmother was a very highly educated woman, spoke 8 languages, was sent away to Imperial Finishing School in Budapest, Hungary, and so on. She and my grandfather, a colonel in the army and the commander of the garrison in the town of Sremska Mitrovica, the former Roman capital of Sirmium, raised my father as a highly educated young man. He graduated the top student in his high school. He went to Belgrade, the capital of Serbia. He was born in 1919. He's a World War I baby, my late father. He grew up in Serbia, and by the late 1930s, when Adolf Hitler was rising and when Europe was heading into World War II, he graduated with the gold medal from the law faculty of Belgrade Law School. The war started on April the 6th. He volunteered the first day of the war, was designated as a lieutenant. He soon became a captain when his commander was killed by a sniper. And he fought 4 years from 1941 to 1945 against the Nazis and later against the communists who, with the support of England, deposed the monarchy to which our family was attached in Serbia and Yugoslavia. My father went into exile. He managed to make it to Italy in 1945. In Italy, he was put in a displaced persons camp. Because he also, like his mother, spoke 8 languages, he was hired as a camp translator. He became friends with the English commander of the camp. His job was to interview all of the detained persons and determine who they were. Were they Nazis? Were they communists? Which country were they from? What was their story? And so on. In late 1945, in the middle of the night, sometime around 3 in the morning, the English camp commander came to my father's bunk he was still in the displaced persons camp, but engaged by the camp commander. Camp commander came to his bed and said, Sava, my father's name was Sava, Sava, take your identity card, nothing else, walk through the gates of this camp, do not look back, do not come back. My father walked out of that camp and headed out into Italy, out of the camp into the Italian countryside from Trieste. And 2 hours later, the British forces who were in charge of the camp put all of the camp detainees, about 4,000 men, into boxcars, telling them that they were going to be sent to the West. When those train cars started rolling to the east, across the border into now communist Yugoslavia, many of them tried to commit suicide. It didn't make much difference, because as soon as they rolled into Yugoslav territory, the cattle cars were opened and machine guns, 50 caliber machine guns mounted on tripod, killed them all. No trial, no discussion. Everybody was killed, except my father. My father made his way to Rome, and by sheer luck, he got a job because he was still wearing English uniform, because the English had provided the World War II uniforms for the Yugoslav Royal Army. And he was given a job as a facilities guard, in English uniform still, with the occupation forces. From that job, he, in Rome, managed by quirk of fate to meet his former schoolmate from Yugoslavia, who was half Italian and half Croatian. So a Catholic citizen of what would have been World War II fascist Croatia, who managed to escape and get to Rome. That man introduced my father to the rat lines, because by being a well-placed Catholic working in the Vatican infrastructure, Tony, his half-Italian friend, was every day getting a briefcase which he had to take a train from Rome to Milano and sell the contents of the briefcase for American dollars, and then return those American dollars to the Vatican. And because my father, his friend, was already wearing an English uniform and could pass relatively unobserved, he offered my father a job. And he gave my father a briefcase and said, "Here, Sava, take this," knowing that my father was a jiu-jitsu champion and a very strong man. He gave him the briefcase, and of course the case fell to the ground. Inside the case, solid gold bullion marked with the Nazi logo of the so-called independent state of Croatia, Hitler ally in World War II. That gold had been smuggled through the rat lines by the fascists of Croatia to the Vatican, and the Vatican was now taking that gold to have it smelted in Milano in return for US dollars. So my father, at the age of 1945, so he was 26, born in 1919. At the age of 26, he became a direct witness to the Vatican's complicity in the passage of Nazi war criminals to South America. And he was already very strongly anti-Vatican, because his girlfriend in 1941, when the war started, had been Jewish, a Jewish Serbian citizen, the daughter of the cantor at the synagogue in the city of Vinkovci in modern-day Croatia. She was arrested as soon as the war started. As soon as the government of Yugoslavia fell to the Nazis, she was arrested and sent to Jasenovac, the 7th death camp. Everybody knows of the 6 death camps, which were primarily killing Jews. Very few people know that there was a 7th death camp in which more than hundreds of thousands, so probably 500,000 or more, primarily Serbs, some Jews and some Gypsies, were exterminated. That's where his first girlfriend was killed. She had her throat slit. I'm not sure if any of this background is important for the story, but this is my background. My father made it to Italy. He gets from Rome. He refuses to deal in the gold that has been smelted in Croatia using the fillings, the gold fillings of the Serbs, Jews, and Gypsies who were killed in the camps. And he decides that as the Italians are rendering people, returning them to Tito, who is shooting them without trial, my father decides to escape. He walks through the Alps, through the snowy Alps. He manages to fight off a three-man, unarmed, he managed to fight off a three-man Italian border guard patrol, and he makes it into Switzerland. In Switzerland, he presents his identification. He has no diplomas. He is admitted into the law school in Switzerland, and he graduates there in a law program and wins the gold medal in German. So he now spoke already, I think in Serbia, he spoke 6 or 7 languages. He learns Italian while in Italy. He goes to Germany, graduates from law school, and he gets a scholarship to Canada. He comes to Canada, he gets to Montreal, and he meets my mother in Montreal. My mother, at the first meeting, decided that this is the man she's going to marry, and I'm the product of that relationship. I was born in 1961, 16 years after the end of World War II, and I grew up here in Canada. My father became a political science and history professor at university and had a career here in Fredericton, New Brunswick. My mother, on the other hand, was the daughter of an inventor, the inventor of form feed, pin feed, and many other inventions, who unfortunately went bankrupt with the crash of 1929, the same period when my mother was 6 years old. So she grew up in poverty in the post-depression period in Canada. Her father died of alcoholism with the failure of his businesses, and my mother met my father in the 1950s. He arrived in Canada in 48. They married in 1955. 6 years later, I was born. So this is my background. My mother was a school teacher, fluently bilingual. She later learned some German because her grandmother and grandfather had been Germanized Slavs from Eastern Germany. My mother was an activist. She was a member of the Teachers Union. My father was also an activist, and they raised an activist. I started my school in Switzerland at the age of 5. I started kindergarten in Switzerland because my father was doing a sabbatical leave in Switzerland to study secret documents about how the English had put the communists in power in Yugoslavia, not because they particularly liked communists, but because they hated Russians. And they had a communist non-Serb named Josip Broz, a half-Croat, half-Slovenian communist who also hated Russia. And they wanted to put him in power in Yugoslavia to stop Russia from getting to the Mediterranean and a warm port for its navy, which could have rivaled England's navy. I grew up in Canada. I started school in Switzerland. I learned French. So when I returned for grade 1 in my hometown in Fredericton, my studies in kindergarten in Switzerland were more advanced than grade 2 in Canada. So they immediately jumped me up into second year studies, and I skipped a grade shortly thereafter and became the youngest person in my class for the rest of my studies. Luckily, I'm very tall for my age. I'm 6'5" now, but I was able to compensate for my youth by being taller than most people my age. And so I went through school like that, but I was obviously had to play catch up with students who had more life experience than I did. I went through regular elementary school and then junior high school. In junior high school, I started to become aware of how the control systems work in the education, in schools, in the educational system, and how students are not asked their opinion or their thoughts. And I started to get involved in rudimentary student politics in grade 9, which was the last year of junior high school. Naturally, the teacher shut down the student government as soon as we criticized anything in the school, and I just forgot about it, went to high school. In grade 10 in high school, Because I was a good student, 2 or 3 weeks into the classes, the classroom teacher picked me to be our representative on the Students' Representative Council. I started to understand how politics worked and the dynamics of power through high school. By the 12th grade of high school, I was elected the vice president of the student council of the biggest high school in Eastern Canada, 3,500 students in one school. We had our own radio station, our own newspaper, and I became, at the age of 16, I became very well versed in the power structures and communication systems used in Western political and civil society. By the end of grade 12, the high school principal and his vice principals had shut down the student newspaper, had shut down the student radio, and had shut down the student council, at least in some part due to my influence on student affairs. At that time, I was also active in the chess club. I was a chess champion in junior high school. I was a leading chess player in my big 3,500 member high school. And so I took to chess, and my father was, like I am, 40 years older than my two sons. My father was 40 years older than me. So when you have a much older father, you don't play catch with him, and you don't play baseball or soccer with him. You play chess with him. So I played chess every night after supper with my father from about the age of 6 or 7. And we would play 3 games. Why did we play 3 games? Because I always lost. And my father would give me 3 chances to win. And it wasn't until I was 14 that I won my first game. So my typical after supper was watch Star Trek, if we had it, watch some television, and then sit with my father and play 3 games of chess, which I lost every game for 7 years straight. On the 7th year, I finally beat my father, and my father decided we didn't need to play as much chess as we had played before. My father had been the top student activist in the University of Belgrade. He was the only non-communist, anti-communist elected to the student parliament in 1941. So 200 members of the student parliament, 1 was an anti-communist. That was my father. And typically when he gave speeches in public, he would be physically attacked and they would have chairs broken over his head. And it was very good for him that he had been raised by a military family and he could defend himself. I followed in his footsteps. I became an avid chess player, and I joined the debating club. And from the debating club, even though I'd had a bad experience with student government in junior high school, I was recruited into the student parliament, and then I ran for a student council president, and once again, as in junior high school, they shut everything down. I was accepted to go to McGill University, which was at that time the best university in Canada, to study political science. But my father said, "Don't do what I did, John. You're only going to get in trouble again. Study engineering and don't go away from home to a big city like Montreal. Stay here in Little Fredericton where there's 50,000 people so I can monitor you." He knew what he was dealing with because I was turning out